Now, the other day, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Most Reverend Justin Welby, was discussing freedom of speech in the unelected House of Lords. And in that discussion, he was saying that we need to stop using the term snowflake when referring to young people. Now, snowflake is actually meant to define a young person who's apparently just wants to help. But he's already slightly out of touch because I think the term's now been overtaken by wallflowers and also the word woke. But nonetheless, he was trying to make a point. He also spoke about being deeply moved on hearing the intolerance faced by J.K. Rowling and academics for their views on gender identity. He warned, in his words, about being howled down on social media by abusive and threatening hecklers and so-called cancel culture. Now, whilst I agree with many of his observations, it got me thinking, what is the point of the church, and indeed religion, in our modern society? And should it really be getting involved in politics? When we hear about sexual abuse scandals and paedophilia within it and many other religions, which include Jehovah's Witnesses, how can religious institutions dare to tell us how we should live or even dare to comment on matters of gender and identity? Weren't they one of the last to accept and acknowledge homosexuality? Some still won't perform same-sex ceremonies. Now, I studied philosophy and theology. I went to an all-girls convent boarding school run by nuns, and I came away from that experience with a deep sense of disappointment. The hypocrisy I observed was off the scale. I'm not an anti-religious person, and I'm not anti-religion. I'm open to all different faiths and belief structures, but I'm struggling to find the relevance of the church in this modern-day world. I love all the traditions like Easter, of course, Christmas, which is the church's busiest time on the calendar, and I'm outraged at the suggestion of cancelling the actual word Christmas for fear of offending minorities. But I have to be honest. Although Christmas signifies the birth of Jesus Christ, going to church is the last thing that I think of doing. So how relevant is the church in this country with its many opulent and mostly empty buildings, and should it be getting involved in politics? After all, many of these archbishops and those in its hierarchy who have a voice don't live in the real world.